Section 2. Mistranslating the Great Commission. The modern English translation of the first part of the Great Commission, found in Matthew 28 verse 19, is ambiguous. The reason for this is that English, strictly speaking, has no verb meaning to disciple. The concise Oxford English Dictionary, 8th edition, lists the word disciple as a noun only. The nearest verb to it is to discipline, which, although not without some relevance for what it means to be a disciple of Christ, does not convey the meaning of the Greek term used, mathetusate, aorist, active imperative, of matheteo. Modern English translations get around this by using the phrase make disciples of. The Greek verb means to be a disciple. In the Koine Greek of the New Testament, which was the everyday language spoken by the people of the Roman Empire in the first century, this verb is used transitively to mean to disciple. In Matthew 28 verse 19, it is an imperative with, quote, all the nations, end quote, panta ta ethne, as the object of the command. In other words, the Great Commission does not say, quote, go and make disciples of all nations, end quote. Rather, it says, quote, go and disciple all the nations, end quote, i.e., go and make all nations my disciples. Because there is, strictly speaking, no single term in English that translates this Greek verb, the Authorized Version, following Tyndale and the Geneva Bible, translates the first part of the Great Commission as, quote, go ye therefore and teach all nations, end quote. This translation preserves the grammar of the original Greek accurately. Most modern translations, however, have followed the translators of the Revised Version, which reads, quote, go ye therefore and make disciples of all the nations, end quote. The New American Standard Bible reads, quote, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, end quote. Likewise, the Revised Standard Version reads, quote, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, end quote. Even the New King James Version changes the Authorized Version's wording to, quote, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, end quote, failing completely to observe an important reason for keeping the Authorized Version's, quote, teach all nations, end quote. There are two problems with this modern translation. First, it turns the Greek verb to disciple, matheteo, into the English verb to make, and the direct object of this verb becomes the English noun disciples instead of nations. Second, it turns the object of the Greek verb into a genitive, i.e., it turns the word, quote, nations, end quote, which in the Greek is in the accusative case, the case of the direct object, into the genitive case governed by the preposition, quote, of, end quote, which is not in the Greek. This gives us an English phrase that is ambiguous in the place of a Greek phrase that is not ambiguous. The modern English translation could be taken to mean just what the Greek says, i.e., quote, make the nations the disciples of Christ, end quote, but it does not have to be understood in this way. It is ambiguous, vague. It could equally be taken to mean something else, and unfortunately in the modern times, because of the pietistic theological consensus that has come to dominate the Church's understanding of the faith, it has overwhelmingly been taken to mean something else, namely, quote, make disciples from among all the nations, end quote. This is a perfectly reasonable and correct understanding of the English, but it is an incorrect rendering of the Greek. The Greek says that we are to go and disciple the nations, not make disciples of the nations, i.e., from among the nations. Many people misunderstand the Great Commission as a command to make disciples of people from all nations. This is not what Jesus commanded his disciples to do in the Great Commission. Rather, he commanded us to disciple the nations as nations, i.e., to make Christian nations. The vagueness of the modern English translation has led to, or at least has helped to confirm in the opinion of most Christians today, an incorrect understanding of the Great Commission. This misconception has been so readily accepted because of the pietistic nature of contemporary Christian belief, i.e., the idea that the Christian faith relates to an understanding of spirituality that is narrowly focused on the individual's private devotional life, church worship, which is increasingly equated with singing choruses, and the, quote, afterlife, end quote, all things that relate to the upper story of reality in the dualistic worldview. In this perspective, the faith is not seen as having a direct bearing on the everyday issues that determine so much of our lives, for example, education, politics, welfare, the economy, the arts, business, science, medicine, and culture generally. The Christian faith is not seen as addressing these areas at all by the vast majority of Christians today. The faith has been privatized, and as a result, it has been neutered of its power to transform society. In this context, the misreading of the Great Commission as a command to make individual disciples from among the nations has seemed natural. But the modern context has distorted the Church's understanding of the Bible, and the modern understanding of the Great Commission is erroneous. But how do we disciple the nations? It is impossible to disciple the nations without making individual disciples, but it is possible to make individual disciples without going on to disciple the nations. The difference is one of vision and mission. The Great Commission is a command to disciple the nations. This means that we must make individual disciples, of course, but it does not stop there. It goes further. It means that the nations must submit to the Lord Jesus Christ and become Christian nations. This is what the Bible teaches, and it is what was understood to be the case in previous ages. The idea that the Great Commission is just about making individual disciples, soul-saving, is a new idea in the English-speaking world, roughly coterminous with the diabolical mistranslation of the Great Commission in the Revised Version of the Bible, which almost all modern English translations have followed.